All right. So welcome. This is the Global Dialogue Lab, which is a program of One World in Dialogue. And I'm Elizabeth Diebold.
I'm Thomas Steininger.
And today our guest is Dr. Rose Sackey-Milligan. And welcome, Rose.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to share my musings.
Thank you. And just to give a little background about Rose, Rose is an educator and by training a sociocultural anthropologist. But she's worked for many years, a couple of decades in social change philanthropy. She's got a BA in social science from the University of the Virgin Islands, an MA and PhD in anthropology from the University of Connecticut. And she's been active in social justice work for probably over 30 years. And anti-racist work. She's worked with a close colleague or friend of ours, Raúl Quiñones Rosado, who is, and the two of them together are have created something called Cambio Integral, C Integral, which is a social change from the bottom up and inside out adventure or venture. And Rose has also was the director of the social justice program at the Center for Contemplative Mind in Society, and that's working with the anthroposophist Arthur Zions and Mirabai Bush, both of whom we know. And you're right now a senior program officer at Mass Humanities in Northampton, Mass. But also, Rose has studied and practiced the African-Cuban Yoruba derived Lukumi faith and was ordained in 1997. And she's a meditation practitioner as well as a practitioner of yoga and sacred ritual in that tradition. So I had a conversation with Rose a few weeks ago about what she's been thinking about in terms of making change in these really drastically changing times, and she raised some questions that I found very compelling and very important about the relationship between our social identities. And social identity is something that she and Raúl in C Integral really forefront. That for those of you who know integral theory, social identity is actually not quite really on that map. And but social identity is the place that's between. It's how our culture affects ourselves. It's the place where the individual and our society meet. And it's defined by the categories that our cultures have identified or labeled. So that's race, class, gender, religion, and these identities have been the site of a lot of the liberation struggles over the last 40, 50 years and longer, really. And the question that Rose was asking is, how does our fighting for liberation in which means identifying very strongly with our social identities, how does that interfere with or obstruct or relate to our desire for a deeper liberation? And I felt she turned that question in a very interesting way in asking about white people and oneness. And I found this a very compelling question because it's something that I've noticed also, which is, so in terms of the social category of whiteness, can white culture claim oneness when it also claims white privilege, which is about separation from, superiority to those who are different from. And I think I think this is a very interesting and critically important and set of issues. And we were just speaking with Rose before we started about how we came to this work because, in some ways, because of the need to create dialogue across these categories that are marked as difference and are about different life experiences within our culture, within the dominant culture. But how can we have dialogue that is resonant with and rich with different voices and respect and held in something together? So that's our mission and question, and this is so it's very germane what you're bringing, Rose, to our forum today.
Great, thank you. I'm looking forward to hearing the responses and to, of course, to see how this question resonates or not with others. So I'm keenly excited about the outcome of our time together today. I think I'd like to say, first of all, I think that you've certainly articulated the question very clearly. And I'd like to just give a little bit of a context for how this question arose to me. How did I come to this question? And as you probably know, and maybe others who are listening, that the history of the interest and the excitement around expanding awareness grew early in the 1970s, at least in the United States. There was an interest in how can one access this greater sense of being, and we saw the welcoming of many sacred spiritual teachers from the East in the early 70s that shared their perspective on Buddhism and Hinduism and a whole range of other Eastern traditions. And then fast forward into the 1990s, we see this burst of interest in contemplative pedagogy in higher ed. And that has continued to grow and emerge. But it wasn't until perhaps the late 1990s and early 2000 that you begin to see a recognition in the world of social change, progressive social change, individuals who are advocating for reversing social injustices. You begin to see an interest and an exploration, a willingness to explore, what is the value of these spiritual traditions, these tools, these contemplative tools, these reflective tools. What might they have to offer social activism, transformative leadership? And you begin to see the terms such as engaged spirituality, this movement, engaged spirituality, liberation spirituality. People began to give it a name, transformative leadership. They began to name the integration of practices and tools, spiritual practices and tools, into organizing and movement building. Mm-hmm. So here we are, 17 years later, and my question comes from that place. It comes from a place of recognizing that the attempt by social justice world organizers, community movement building, have begun to embrace these tools more and more, but mostly, as far as I can tell, from a place of recognizing that they have value in that they offer the ability, the capacity to touch that place of deeper wisdom, to touch that place of inner joy, to touch that place of intuitive, of guidance, touch that place of focus and attention. And these tools offer a way to really expand one's capacity to be more effective as a social justice leader, a contemplative worker, a cultural worker in the field of social change. This has been, in my view, the way in which that embrace has manifested. To a certain extent, it has been, I question, let me put it this way, I question the depth of the embracement and the exploration, particularly as it could potentially have an impact on liberation. Mm. I also question the way in which the world of activism, all of us as leaders in our own communities, there seems to be a way in which we have come to accept what spiritual leaders have been saying to us. Various sages representing a whole range of spiritual traditions have shared that the world that we see is an illusion, is Maya. The world is unreal. Things are not as we see. There's no sense of absoluteness, including, the one who is doing the perceiving. Mm-hmm. That the world that we see is not necessarily what we think it is. It is essentially, what our interpretation is about what we're seeing depends on the ways our minds have been socially constructed, depends on what we consider our social reality. So if we accept that is true, if we say that it's the interpretation that we bring to the world that determines what we think that world is, then in my mind that applies to how it applies to issues of race and racism. It applies to issues of gender and sexuality and class. That these are constructs. These are constructs based on our interpretation of what we think we are seeing. Yet we spend, if these are if these things are not real, right? We spend as social justice workers, we spend an inordinate amount of time chasing and putting all of our energies in reversing or addressing, focusing on something that is not really real. Race, this whole question of race doesn't really exist. We made it up. Mm-hmm. We made all this stuff up. yet we spend all of our time trying to reverse what is unreal. It's like a ghost in many ways. And so if that is true, then what does that mean? What does that mean for liberation? What is liberation, in fact? What are we trying to liberate ourselves from? Is it the unreal? Is it the falsely constructed? What essentially are we trying to do? Yet it is this consciousness, because we've come to believe we've come to believe that the unreal is really true, and we're chasing and working to reverse the unreal. This consciousness is driving all of our political and social action. And so because we're spending so much time focusing on the unreal, there's a way in which we're, I think, less prone to explore other dimensions of what potentially could be real. That may be in this exploration of what is real, the natural intelligence, this natural state. Maybe if that is the real, maybe that is the place we might want to put our energy. And that might be the place where transformation can really happen. And so that's where I question whether our energy, so much energy into social constructions of race and identity, and not to say that these are not important issues, but it's the attention, the focused and deliberate attention that consumes so much of our time that I think that it contradicts, it obstructs, it eclipses the search for transcendence, which is the location from which liberation might in fact come from. And so I don't know if I've gone over my time in terms of trying to lay out my musings. But that's what I have been considering. And so the implication is that is liberation possible? Is true liberation possible given where our attention, our focused attention has been, and how do we address issues of race, be it from a perspective of the dominant or the subordinate categories. If there's not an interest or commitment to exploring those deeper level of consciousness. Why don't I stop there and maybe see if you have conversations that you'd want to
Great.
share at this point.
I feel like, okay, that to take in what you just said is like, all right, let's have a pause for a minute to respect what it is that you just said. Yeah.
And at the same time, the way I understand you're asking a very provocative question. As I hear you, you ask the question, in our cause of liberation, in this social cause for liberation, what we want to liberate in the, let's say, the subordinate, the race, are we not just talking about illusions? is liberation not something that is beyond these illusions? But at the same time, I would assume you're not denying the fact of subordination. You're not denying the fact of racism as being a social reality. So how can we look into the fact that maybe something deeper is true, is real? I think you called it natural energy. Was that?
No, the
Natural intelligence.
Natural intelligence.
Pure intelligence.
Yeah, pure intelligence, natural intelligence. And of course, from a recognition of something like natural intelligence, liberation means something very different than if I'm identified with my whiteness or with my working class identity in which way ever. So we're talking about what is liberation really, without bypassing at the same time that social conflict and subordination is part of our social fabric. So my question is, would you say that somehow there's reality to both in some way, and somehow we have to find a way where we don't deny social realities without being locked into the social constructs that we make that are part of how we do society in this way?
I agree with you. I don't want us to deny, to be in a state of denial and to bypass. I don't think that is healthy, or that it is, or that you can do that. Mm-hmm. You cannot. And that is the dilemma. Because we are this dynamic field of consciousness. Mm-hmm. It's both and operating at the same time. Mm-hmm. And so this idea of this understanding or recognition of oneness has to be a true recognition, not a conceptual one. Mm-hmm. It cannot be, I understand that we're one anyway. I think that it has to be a full recognition of the truth, the absolute truth of the being that we are, mm-hmm. to be able to then also see that there's another dimension of consciousness, even within this one body, mm-hmm. that is aware of a belief, a false belief in the person, mm-hmm. in the sense of a person. And so these two things for a while will happen simultaneously. That there is this recognition, for me as a person for me in this body, in this black body, there will be a recognition of the ways in which I have internalized white racism. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, there is a recognition beyond concept, that there is a field of awareness that can observe, mm-hmm. that I have this that I'm carrying this idea, mm-hmm. that's in my mind. Mm-hmm. So there are two levels, or I don't know if levels, but there's a way in which these two dynamic forms of consciousness can occur simultaneously. And so, and I can understand, you know, a person in this body, I understand an adverse consciousness towards black bodies.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that is felt in the physical body, that is observed by body language
Mm-hmm.
and words, that is observed by the socially constructed systems.
Mm-hmm.
That's observable. I can see that and sense that and feel that. And at the same time, there is this recognition that of a consciousness that transcends that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's and, both and.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not a concept for me personally. It's not a concept.
Mm-hmm.
There's a way in which that is deeply sensed.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the reverse, of course, would be for people from white culture. I think that that what could be helpful, I don't know, what could be helpful is the recognition of the consciousness of superiority
Mm-hmm.
and dominance, and the way that that is that manifests in the world, ideas, the way the global social reality is constructed.
Mm-hmm.
And to transcend that,
Mm-hmm.
would be the recognition that, in fact, that construct is false. That is not true. Those are stories that people made up, right? Those are stories that people made up, and I can recognize, because of a deeper understanding, that I am more than that. That I'm more than that. My musing continues with the notion that at some point, recognizing those two levels of consciousness, levels for lack of a better word, I think eventually becomes universal. Once you don't believe the story anymore, truly, once you recognize the falsehood, the untruth of it, I think that these two seemingly distinctive forms will fall away. Or I should say, the more universal, the less relative, the more universal sense of self becomes much more pronounced, much more dominant, and one can live their life from that space. And that's where the liberation comes from, because for example, as one who identifies as female in this Black body, and I no longer believe the stories. It's just a story. It's false. It's not real. I understand what it does when you believe it. I understand it. I see it. I know it. Yet at the same time, it does not consume my life. It does not overwhelm. It doesn't direct my daily life.
Yeah.
And so that's that in that space, that's where the liberation. it then becomes, so it's not it's not as if I'm waiting for a number of a growing number of people from white culture to finally realize the untruth of their existence, which is connected to mine, of course. I'm not waiting for that.
Mm-hmm.
It is my experience that one can feel this deeper sense of liberation without this so-called political action. I believe that too, we might want to consider whether that in and of itself is sufficient.
The political action, yeah, yes. Yeah, no, I find what you're saying to be very important in because it reflects, there's several streams here that I think that are important to follow. One is how social justice work has become kind of mired in or kind of lost in a loop of fighting that which is unreal and being victimized by that which is unreal, even though it does, I would want to uphold the social reality of it.
Absolutely.
That there's no doubt that this social reality exists.
Yes.
There's that, and the fact that and you said at the beginning, and I also see a lot of in the social justice movements, the move towards helping people with burnout through meditation and through spiritual practice.
That's fine. Yes.
Yeah, which is fine, but it was sort of what you said at the beginning. It's not going deep enough,
in my view.
Yeah, well, because the liberation is actually, it's a profound thing. The liberation you're speaking about, it is what is called enlightenment. It is the recognition of that which transcends, that we are all a part of. And I mean, this has been sort of a core to my work with women, is that until we have a deep grounding in that, our freedom is always contingent upon or looking for someone else's approval in a certain sense.
Yeah.
And so there's that. What's interesting to me is I feel that there's that the work of around these social categories and to see through them, and to see through them doesn't mean denying them. It means owning them. It's like, I see the privilege that whiteness gives me. I see what that is. I can see that from, and not be, and be able to not have to defend and protect because of this other dimension.
Mm-hmm. And
I think that that's really important. I think when your identity is all that you have, and you live in a personal world of individuated experience, my own psyche, my own history, my people's history, perhaps my gender's history, you don't have the space examining and dismantling your identity is all that you have. I mean, the identity is all you've got, which is why this transcendent dimension is so important. It gives you a space to be that is beyond that which is caught up in the drama that we're in right now. And from that, there's a possibility of owning it in a profound way, in order to be able to respond to life differently. And what I see is that there's too much attention, I think, amongst the spiritual movements that are primarily white, in just experiencing the liberation, and not looking at, and not using that transcendent space as a vantage point to see how it is that one is constructed in social reality.
Yes, you said several things, and I was trying to catch all of them. I wonder, though, if one can really claim liberation and still at the same time reap the benefits or suffering that each of these categories present. Liberation means that you have gone beyond, not merely just conceptually understanding something. It is a lived, embodied sense, in my sense. I can't, the words. It's something lived, it's embodied, it is recognized, it is felt, it is and so once one has been able to experience that, then my question is, why are you still clinging to these false beliefs? That was my question to you. One, and then the second thing I think you said is that we're so mired as individuals. We're so mired as individuals in the way that we have been culturally conditioned. That's all we have. And I'm not sure that I agree with that, really. Maybe we believe that's all that we...
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I mean.
That we believe, we have a belief that that's all that we have. We believe that, I am a person, I am an autonomous individual, I'm an autonomous individual entity. I believe the ways that I have been taught, I've been educated from my parents, from school, my society. I believe that all I am is as a school teacher or an anthropologist, that I teach in a high school, that I'm a Christian, that I'm a woman, that I have 3 kids, I'm the daughter of Joe and Susan, that our world is very limited. The personhood is very limited. And so I think that I'm also saying that that we live and give all of our attention because we believe that that's who we really are as a being. Right. We give that so much attention that I am black or I am white or I am, that becomes our world. Right. That is, in and of itself, an obstruction and contradiction. Something. It gets in the way. Yet at the same time, the work for social justice is about resolving those contradictions. But we do it from a place of a non-transcendent place, which does not get us very far. No. So I think that.
Yeah, exactly.
Also what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If I may come in here with a, in fact, very simple question. If one sees through the social constructions that you are describing, when one stops clinging to the illusion of this, very simple, what are you going to do? Well, because from very spiritual tradition, the answer is you don't do anything. There's nothing to do. There's just the reality that this is all Maya.
Your world becomes much more broad, expansive.
Well, can you just say more?
Your doings, you don't stop living. Your world does not become less dynamic.
So what are you doing and why? If you are beyond these illusions of identity and these social constructions are seen through, what motivates you to act? And what actions are you motivated to? And why?
Your actions could be doing what I'm doing. It could you could, for example, get insights to speak to exactly what I am speaking to. There is a clarity about your social environment that is so profound to you that your work in the world becomes very different. Your openness and your commitment to resolving social issues might be one that is not riddled with anger and hate, but one that comes with such deep and profound understanding that you can move in a space and work that is just much more compassionate and loving. That you don't become bitter, and that your suffering is so less you can understand other people's suffering. So I don't know if there is a blueprint for what you do, but you're moving and living and doing what you feel the impulse to do. But the difference is that the impulse and the insight and the clarity is not coming from the personal mind, the limited sense of self. It is coming from a deeper space. So your doings become perhaps much more I can't find the word really.
Well, what's interesting is that this space, I mean, from my experiences, it gives me a different kind of energy to be in the work that I've always cared about, and meaning that the work in relation to social justice becomes queried from a different place. There's an inquiry from a different place, but it's the sense of need and relevance of the work changes, but it doesn't. But it's still important.
Of course, it does not lose its importance. But for just using my own experience, drawing on my own experience, I am less troubled. I'm less troubled by what's happening in the world. It's not that I am not concerned, but I'm not consumed by the inconsistencies and the pain and the suffering, because there's a level at which I understand it now that I didn't understand it when I was 20 years younger, I think. It's very difficult to put into words. And also, I've come to accept that perhaps this is part of the journey.
Mm-hmm.
That what we perceive as, these this suffering based on our social identities, they take us somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
They're not. They're part of the process of our of returning to what we really and truly are as beings.
Mm-hmm.
I others may not agree, and that's fine. I'm certainly not looking for agreement. It is what I'm sensing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not troubled. In fact, I'm not troubled by the challenges around race or racism.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an incredible opportunity
Mm-hmm.
for if we can see it that way, it's an incredible opportunity for us to return to the space of the fullness of who we really are, the place of our deepest liberation and joy and power as in this world. So it's not something, it's not comfortable being in this body, but it's not something that I scorn.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I scorned it before.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of personal anger and rage, and and I think those things are important. Those things are important in the process. One has to engage in the struggle as part of the process. So you need that. You need all of those.
Yeah. No, it's powerful hearing you, because basically what you're saying is you don't deny social reality, but you are not enslaved by social identity.
Exactly.
Exactly. And so you're not denying, and in this non-denial, it also does not mean that you stop responding to it, but you respond from a very different place.
Exactly.
And this difference makes all of the difference.
Absolutely.
And that's also what I'm hearing. There is a liberation already before everything that is part of the social whatever.
Exactly.
That does not deny the social sphere and everything that we as humans have to deal with in this, but it acknowledges something that is completely beyond it, and it's much more who I am, who we are, and that needs to be responded to. And that is a point of liberation that allows me to respond to everything I responded to before, but not from an enslaved place.
Absolutely, and I'm so delighted that you been able to capsulize it and summarize it so eloquently. That's what I've come to know and to understand.
And I think that perspective is so critical within a social justice framework.
Right.
Because the word equality being such a big term in social justice work, but I feel, for example, at this point, it's not clear what that means.
Yeah.
In the movements, it's not clear what justice is being asked for, what equality actually is.
Mm-hmm.
But you begin to have a sense of it from this perspective that you're speaking from.
Yes.
A sense of what that is, and it's not about something that one hangs on to, but it is something about what one fundamentally is.
Yes. And truly recognizing what that is.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
And I'm curious if I also hear you right, there's something particular and maybe different applying to white privilege. because of the white privilege position, because there's something, and I think you also see this with people who have some spiritual inclination to have at least some sense of liberation and unity, but in that, not the need to see the privilege.
Yeah.
Well, actually, what Rose said was she didn't understand why that would be the case. But I think that the thing that's interesting is that it does seem very much to be the case and that is an interesting issue, which is why I really feel that somehow to the world of social justice work that this question needs to be brought into these kind of white oneness contexts, because it's essential.
Absolutely. Yes, it's something that I hope, that those circles of people will reflect on. And maybe it's an unconscious, well, maybe I can't imagine that white privilege is unconscious for many people. I mean, it must be clear the ways in which white bodies certainly have more privilege than others, can have access, have the capacity to move in spaces, to do a lot of things, are represented in such in terms that are glowing, that are more accepting. So to deny that would be troubling. Mm. Yet at the same time, I hope that there could be a way in which these ideas of white privilege are addressed, not from a place of guilt at all, but an understanding of how, or an exploration of how the privileges are just as equally obstructive as the ways in which the lack of privilege and the belief in both sides of the coin are obstructive. Yeah. Yes.
No, I'm sort of thinking about my own experience in this, and I think that I find it interesting. There is a different dynamic with domination and with unconscious sort of alignment with a culture that sets up categories of domination and subordination that then one is identifies without thinking unconsciously. This is who I am. I mean, there's in gender work, there's a nifty little study where they ask men and women to look in the mirror and say what they see. And women, and I also don't know the racial dimensions of this, if it was all white people, or if this was who was involved here. But the women look in the mirror and say, I see a woman, and the men look in the mirror and say, I see a human being. But that's an instant identification with the super category, the universal category. Yeah, it's unquestioned.
Yeah, and I would venture to say that maybe I guess that when white people look in the mirror, they might say, I see a human being, because there's so much othering. Othering that is assumed to be non-human, assumed to be not at the social levels, not that intellectually, emotionally, materially. There's so much othering. I probably wouldn't be surprised if that same example that you use applies about race as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's not like I see a white man. I see a white woman.
Yeah.
It's like I don't need to mention that category because that's not a category that's relevant to me. And I mean, this is where I think really social justice work needs to come to the spiritual world, in a renewed way of engaging with these categories and being able to see through them, and be with each other in it from a different place.
Yeah, and that's going to be very difficult, I think, for some, because social identity is important. Even in some of the circles that I move, it is important to be identified as a Black woman. That is important. Or a Black man. Those categories are important. Or, as other categories, as a lesbian, as a gay man, transgender, those categories are so deeply important, many deeply held. And so if there's a process, if there's a process of liberation that might take you to an identity that is much more universal, then maybe it may take some time to recognize that, these categories are, not as important, or the importance of them begin to fall away as you move much more to this other dimension of consciousness. And so that's the tug. That's the tug. It's important politically as a person to have an identity, because that's what the struggle is about.
Right.
And then you're looking for, you believe that is the path to social and political liberation, because that's your identity. But I'm suggesting that there's another space that where identity becomes less important over time.
Right.
You cannot force it. You have to be ready to take that on. It's not something you can impose upon.
Yeah. What I also find fascinating, to apply what you are saying to this very conversation that we are having. And in a very, again, simple and direct way, when I at least attempt to go to the place that you are suggesting, I see you differently. Because in that perspective, in that seeing, there's something where we are allowed to be in the same place.
Yes.
And that does not necessarily, or not at all, mean to deny everything that is social reality. It doesn't mean any of that.
Yeah.
But it changes completely our being together in this very conversation that we are having at this moment. It's very interesting. If I change the perspective to my white European male identity, something changes. Allow, to the degree I can, to let go of that, something different is opening up. And it's, at least in my experience, very obvious which is the freer place.
True, yeah.
It's just very obvious. Even the freer place to address everything that needs to be addressed. Ironically or tragically.
Well, or paradoxically.
Yeah.
Paradoxically. Yeah. The place from which one can actually begin to engage with what could liberation, equality, etc. means is this place that is already, in some measure, free.
In that sense, what you're suggesting and that's also kind of a tragic paradox, allows those things that need to be addressed in a social just case to be addressed in a very different way that allows to really that liberation
to then happen.
To happen.
Exactly.
Then, strange enough, you are yourself in the way of really finding the way out.
Yeah. Yes. Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. But it's also interesting, I find, that I can relate to this less in a kind of a conceptual, intellectual way, but more in the way I perceive our conversation, for example, and see the different place it's opening up from one or the other. And just have to face the fact something is different if we go there or if we go there.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, that's part of what Rose has been saying. This is not a conceptual conceptual issue. It's very much as you just brought in, to bring that into the conversation, the non-conceptual nature of where are we coming from when we are engaging together.
Exactly.
And switching to open up to the truth that is undeniable.
Exactly.
That which we are most profoundly connected in transcends our individual identities.
Exactly.
And that we know that.
Yes.
That opens a potentiality here that is liberating in itself.
Right.
But not, and I don't mean that as there is an emotional component to that, but it's not for that, but for the possibility that it holds for us as human beings.
True. And it requires, it's right here. It requires maybe a little effort, but it's not something you can have to have, hours and hours of contemplation about.
Yeah. I think we have a small group with us. I think it's because we missed unfortunately we skipped a month last month, and so our group is a little smaller than usual. But we have some folks with us who we're gonna ask them to join us now. So they're gonna pop onto the screen, and then open up for questions. And Anina. And in some ways, we can work to carry on the conversation as we have been. That there's this doesn't have to be a formal question and answer, but can be a continuation of the conversation that we've been having.
Yeah, and you can raise your hand. You can do it virtually, or you can do it directly. And I see someone already did raise your hand. So someone, I will unmute you here.
Or can people unmute themselves?
In fact, what I can do, I unmute all of you, and then you can mute yourself again, and then you have the control on your computer to mute yourself. So I will unmute at this moment everyone, and I ask you on the lower left side of your screen to mute yourself, unless you're talking, then you have the control in your hands.
Okay, great.
I raised my hand.
Yes, we can hear you, Savannah.
Yes.
Okay. You want me to go? Should I go?
Yeah. Yep.
Now you're unmuted, Savannah. Now you're live.
I feel called to respond to you, Rose, in some of the things you said. I, too, have followed the sacred path in many ways similar to yours. And I have learned about responsibility. And what we've done is we talk to each other on ideas and thoughts and work we're doing. Do you know about remote viewing?
Remote viewing?
Yes.
No.
The U.S. government did a study where people do talk to each other mentally, and they're well aware of this. And they've done many things. I've read all about it. Anyway, it's true that we do talk to each other mentally. And to be responsible, we have been talking around the world. I have met many people and seen many people that I have talked with because they saw their faces and I didn't understand what to do with this knowledge. I didn't think it was real. It is nice.
Savannah?
I will be brief, but I have to complete this thought for her. All I can see, because of the dual nature that's real, is that I see millions of people being starved to death, murdered, and displaced. And my work is towards that. It is very hard to get people out of the box into the service. I personally am trying to impact a change in education. But my goal is that everybody has a roof over their head and food on their plate. And that's enough. That would be really something to accomplish. These other questions are for the future generations who build on this awareness at younger ages to discover. None of us will be here in 100 years. I hope, thank you for listening. I have one more thing. I have a great paragraph I'd like to send you on how everybody loves color except when it comes to people.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Savannah.
Rose, do you want to say directly something to that?
Yes. I certainly, as long as we are in this physical body, body needs to be fed, to be clothed. The body needs a roof over its head. Children need to be cared for. Those things are part of our earthly existence that we cannot escape. And so that work is important. I certainly want those things for myself and for everybody else. So those things cannot be, that's part of our earthly existence, as I said before. So to the extent that that is what your work is, I say hats off to you, because that is important work and it's part of our earthly existence. It's not our dynamic existence, I think, is broader than that. Nevertheless, it's an important part of life.
Diane, you.
Yeah, I just, first of all, yeah, I so appreciate, Rose, you being here and just trying to articulate with Thomas and Elizabeth and all of us what these separations seem to be. You know, I don't even know what to ask. All I can say is that what you're bringing to the conversation is something that resonates so much with me, trying to find that place of between social action and liberation, and liberation for the whole, for all of humankind, all of everybody, you know, not even maybe just humankind, but I don't know how to even explain it. I'm sorry, I'm fumbling along here, but I do feel like it's such an important place. There was some point, Elizabeth, where you said that the social justice has to come to the sort of spiritual. And I'm wondering if it isn't more that the spiritual, what we consider and what we engage in as a community of people trying to wrestle with all these egoic conditionings of our own lives, and trying to see this natural state and be in this natural state in our dialogues. How, if it isn't more that we need to embrace the social justice, you know, because I think we're conditioned. There's a conditioning that kind of keeps these things separate. You know, it's a separate world, our spiritual and our spiritual development and our you know, activist work. And this, you know, struggling to find this place of unity where they're not separate. They're not at all separate, you know. And in doing that, there, you know, it seems like there's a place where, when we're talking about white privilege and white identity and identity as a woman or whoever, we do have to. I mean, it seems like there's such an urgency for us to see how we are so conditioned to not see that, that we have to actually take really strong, we have to really go further than we've gone, you know, in sort of saying, oh yes, I understand there's inequality, you know, and I understand that, you know, we have to have the capacity to hold that suffering, hold that anger, hold that this is wrong without hurting other people or ourselves, in recognizing that somehow. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time explaining, but I believe this conversation is just a wonderful place to start, more deepening into more of our who we think we are and how we unconsciously hold our positions. And it's got to do with power too. Somehow give, you know, yeah, that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Anina,
I can unmute you. You are unmuted now, Anina.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for this rare experience. I'd like to tell you, Rose, that as I was listening to you, it was not easy to comprehend everything that you were trying to say, because I felt they were not just words. They come from a whole richness of experience that you went through, and that you embody what you're trying to say. And I feel like inviting you to my living room to have a cup of tea, to get to know more. What are these things you went through, that you are the person, the spirit that you are now. I hear you now in a very important time of my life, because I'm about experiencing what you're talking about. I'm not black, or I don't know, my friends here say that's not politically correct. Even that has to be politically correct, but whatever is correct is still a label, right? So I'm brown, but I also grew up trained to be angry at everything that is white. And I realized, to make it fast forward, that in the end, it's all about the divisions that are inside me. So what's happening outside, I get angry at these divisions, but first I have to look at, I carry these divisions myself. And unless I'm able to embrace that, then I cannot embrace the divisions outside. Mm-hmm. We suffered very much, and the Philippines suffered very much from colonization. Mm-hmm. So we have survived fighting, just fighting and fighting and fighting. We feel this is liberation. This is what you were trying to talk about. Political action and whatever, even our prayers, even our spirituality is all about fighting. We have theology and liberation and everything of that sort. And then I came here to Switzerland and I attended the peace camp, and I hear the sufferings of Germans because of their history. And I hear the reaction of Eastern Europeans who suffered under Germans. And I realized they are my suffering because my father was in the war and their stories are my stories. And suddenly I realized this is, as you said, a false story. This is just a concept of the mind that we created so that some people become powerful, or that we end up angry at each other. And I realized we who were colonized have become so racist ourselves. Yeah. In our attempt to be liberated, we have really, like in our country, Germans are ridiculed, because we use it as jokes, to hit back. But it's just not fair, because I heard about stories of German families suffering during the war, and it's not about being the most powerful place at the time, but it's just human suffering is one. And then I began to realize that beauty can also be one, that joy can also be one, that I don't have to fight my brown skin and fight the white skin of others in order to be one. And now I'm experiencing this same kind of divides within people of my same color. In the Philippines, we're so divided between those who supported the president and those who did not support him. And they made it colors. Those who supported him are red and those who didn't are yellow. So it's just stupid. And I remember at the time when I was suffering so much from this division, it was my small group in this dialogue, and some of them are here right now, Diane, Susan, Savannah, I think, who were with me. And who helped me go through this pain coming from the divisions among my own people. So what's all this race all about? I grew up believing this is the biggest problem in the world. But it seems like, yes, it's true. It's just from within me. And we do the same to each other. And I'd like to thank this group, this dialogue, because moments where I needed to feel the unity in my country, I didn't see you anymore as white. I just saw you as hearts who were listening to me and being with me. Mm-hmm. And that was my liberation. Mm-hmm. Because I realized it's the same heart that I have to open And I'm touched very much, and I'm still working on it, Rose, what you said, that you're not troubled with what's happening in the world. I'm really very much interested in how you reach that stage, because I'm trying to reach that stage. It's not easy. Mm-hmm. I suffer very much still from what's happening in the world, and I feel like I have to do something. But for 3 months I've been here in Europe, and I've not been doing anything. And it's not easy, but it's also nice. It's also nice to just be there with the pain. Mm-hmm. I go to Zen Zanga, mm-hmm. and our teacher keeps saying, well, let the universe take care of this suffering, because the earth has the capacity to transform it. There's so much joy and beauty in the earth. If I go back to my country and say that, they will say I'm crazy. Yeah. Because they will say I'm saying suffering is not real. But I really am interested to know that. I'm serious, Rosa. I want to invite you to my living room. I hope to meet you one time, and because I also feel that you are precious now. You've reached this stage where you speak like a child, in a very pure form. But it's also because of the unique person that you are, your color including. Mm. And I like what you said. You said 2 levels, and I also like what you said, the lack of a better word. Because in a way, levels divide us again. Mm. Because these 2 levels are also one inside us. That you understand the reality, but you are beyond it. I'm praying very much I would experience that. I'm trying my best. Maybe I shouldn't try, because that's dividing me again. Mm-hmm. But maybe just listening to you, I'm already experiencing it somehow. Mm-hmm. This closeness to you. I can imagine how much suffering you see in your people and how much suffering you've been through. But I sense a lot of peace, and I love this peace. I think this is where we all are leading to, all this chaos of Trump and all this suffering in Syria. Yeah. I think in a way they are our angels, these people who cause the suffering, mm-hmm. because they're leading us to a place where there is purely no division. Yeah. Yeah. I cannot say more than that. The thank you is not enough, but you're really touching me at a very important point in my life now.
Thank you, Anina.
Thank you.
Rose, do you want to respond?
Yeah. I just wanted to respond to Anina and say thank you for the invitation. I would be happy to join you in your living room. There's so much to talk about, so much to explore together. So I fully accept the invitation. And
thank you very much. I'm looking forward to that time.
Yes. I also want to say very quickly that while I really want to underscore that, when I say I'm not troubled about what's happening, what's unfolding in the world, mm-hmm. It's because it's because there's it's not that I am accepting and don't see the value of change and transformation. That's we are working towards the transformation to some other level of consciousness that is much more in tune with the fullness of who we are as transcendent beings, essentially. And so I think it comes from an understanding that we're in a path that it is a process, lack of a better word, that we can't escape. This is it. This is life. This is life unfolding to its transcendent place. Mm-hmm. I think that's what I'm understanding. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't mean that I don't experience the full spectrum of emotions. I absolutely do. Believe me, I can feel the depth of pain and the depth of joy. But I just wanted to clarify what I mean by that.
Mm-hmm.
If I may add something quickly,
Yeah.
I think this flow of thought of transcendence and life unfolding can also be true in every aspect of our lives, even our personal lives.
Mm-hmm.
When we experience troubles and try to fight it. Yeah, as you're saying, Rose, I'm learning that this is life unfolding. Right now, I'm struggling with a very difficult process in our family. My youngest son is experiencing severe depression. And my oldest son, Angelos, he's part of this group, went through that, and he showed me how it was a process of unfolding. But now seeing my son again, it's so tempting to look for an easy fix because he's suffering so much, and to trust that something will happen. And in life now, there are so many drugs, so many instant remedies, instant solutions. And my children are my teachers in this. They're so stubborn in telling me they don't like this easy fix. And they're teaching me to just accept the unfolding of life as it is. And in a way, it's also coming from divisions. When you try to fix quickly, you don't. My indigenous community tells me life is both light and darkness, good and evil. And if you're not able to accept both, then you're not allowing life to unfold. It makes me crazy to hear this. Looks like it's the only way out of suffering. It's the only way for peace. Thank you. Thank you.
Great. I think, Rose, when I spoke to you, I mentioned that we would, the group would go into breakout groups, and at this point, and if you had a question that you think would be useful for them to engage with, or interesting for them to engage with, that comes out of what we've discussed so far, where we are right now in this conversation, that'd be great. I don't know if anything pops into mind or something that you think might be useful for the group.
I would offer or suggest that people continue to reflect on this notion of liberation. What does that really mean? And how is it achieved? It's essentially, because I don't think there's a universal understanding or definition of what that is, nor are there any universal agreement on how that is achieved. Maybe liberation is here right now. Maybe we are, it evades our consciousness completely. We are so outward focused, that we are perhaps not recognizing that liberation is here right now in this moment. I don't know. I'm just suggesting that idea continues to be explored and to see where it takes the group.
Great. Good. So we're about to, I think that'll be very fruitful.
Yeah.
So we're about to break into two groups, and hope that you can stay, and we'll keep the groups open for as long as you would like, and and then please write something on the Facebook forum to let us know where you came to, what it is that happened.
Mhm.
Okay. So you're going to get invited to a room, and Rose, you're going to be invited to a room also, and we'll join you there.
Okay.
Okay.